Wendy, could you please let me know when recording's ready? Ready now? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council briefing of the 19th of July 2022. I'd like to welcome you all, welcome members of the public gallery this evening, and start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, paying our respects to elders past and present. Item 2 is apologies members on approved leave of absence. We have a full house this evening. Councillors, thank you for being here with your masks. As Mark McGowan is recommending masks, it's good to see you all following suit. Just to note that I will be an apology for next week's ordinary council meeting. I'm not on leave, I'm on official business with the WA Planning Commission as the Metropolitan Local Government representative on a site visit. So Councillor Gondaszewski has offered to chair the meeting as the deputy. Thank you, Susan. Public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome members of the public gallery. I think you probably all have been here previously, but just in case not, this is our briefing session. No decisions made this evening. This is an opportunity for you to speak and make a statement or ask questions, and then council members ask questions of administration in relation to the items and recommendations presented to us, and the decision-making meeting will happen next Tuesday night. So there's no set order. We just ask that when you do approach the microphone that you state your name, the suburb in which you reside, and the item that you're speaking to this evening. So I'll open public question time. Sure, come on down. Yep, over here.
Okay, I'm Christopher McClelland. I'm one of the artists from Robertson Park Artist Studios, and I'm speaking in support of item 6.1. Look, just briefly, the idea is to move to a new premises. We've been at Robertson Park Artist Studios for 22 years with a lot of support from the council, which has been wonderful. But this new building has come along with a possibility of moving into it, and it just suits us better. It's got better parking. We have, hundreds of people coming in weekly for classes and other events that we have on there, and the parking is much better. There's other community facilities there that we feel we could work with well. Also, the actual building, Halverson Hall, is, well, it's showing its age, and there's asbestos problems in it. There's maintenance things that keep having to be fixed, and the building at North Perth is just in a much better state. So they're the main things. It just actually suits us better to be there, and we'd be very keen to move there. I guess the only condition that we have on our support is that we'd want the same lease there that we have currently, and hopefully the same rent that we have currently. So we have spoken about that with some of the people involved as one of the things that we would really like to keep. So I think that's, or do I stay here or now?
You can be excused now. Thank you, Christopher.
Okay,
you've done a fine job. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. Bianca Sandry from Urbanista Town Planning, located at 231 Bulwer Street, Perth. And I'm speaking in support of the officer recommendation for item 5.8 on tonight's agenda. Firstly, I do want to thank the CEO, Director Andrew Murphy, but particularly Marnie Harrington in the city's administration. She's been exceptional throughout this process and kept us up to date all the way along and worked with us. So I wanted to say thank you. This initiative was led or has been led by Golden Sea Property Development. They're a majority owner of the commercial tenancies and also some of the apartments. I understand that initially when this development was being developed, and I do have some recollection almost a decade ago now, that there was consideration for that laneway to be pedestrianised, but it was never actually formalised and it never really went anywhere. Fast forward to 2022 and we're here and we're now seeking consideration of it. Currently, Washing Lane, as I appreciate you've probably all been there, is dominated by a road that just carries cars, and there's little interaction between those businesses and the street. And the owners of those commercial tenancies have been trying to carefully curate great food and beverage offerings, but they need some interaction and some life in that space. We note that as part of the report, there's been 80.4% of the community that are in support of this transaction from a road per se into a pedestrian laneway, which is really great feedback. I will just note, and although it's probably not determinative, but the 9 objections stated on page 454 is contrary to the 8 objections on page 464 of your agenda. So I think it's actually 8 objections. So it's about 17% of the overall submissions. But the quantum benefit of undertaking this will allow the cities and ourselves to work together and collaboratively to deliver a place that ultimately delivers more landscaping, more seating, more shelter, more vibrancy, and also more connection for people to be able to come and gather and be able to enjoy those offerings there. We have also engaged Mackay Urban Design. So Malcolm has undertaken a review of the laneway for ourselves to understand what options are available in the current format to be able to enhance the place and activate it once it is pedestrianised. You can almost say that was presumptuous of us, but we needed to understand what opportunities were available. In terms of our principle that is guiding this project, it really is to provide a vibrant space for the community to connect with, and it's inherently aligned with the city's vibrant public places policy, which was telling, so I hope the council do support it. It is an exciting project and we look forward to working with the city in partnership in delivering it, and hopefully it's supported next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Bianca. Appreciate you bringing this forward, and thanks for your feedback on the officers too. Next speaker, please. Anyone else wishing to speak or just observing this evening?
I'm speaking in relation to a development application for a change of use. So my name is Steve Yoward. I'm the applicant for the application on behalf of the owners. Essentially, it's a before I start, sorry, I need to acknowledge I personally live in Doubleview. The property address is in North Perth within the LGA. So thanks first, councillors, for allowing us to speak at this briefing. As I said, my name is Steve Yoward, the owner operator of Let Go, a short-term rental management company. We manage 60 properties around Perth. I have to start by saying this DA we've submitted has been pretty intensive so far. We've had to jump through a number of hoops. So I just want to have this opportunity to provide a bit of peace of mind here today. We feel we've comprehensively demonstrated our ability to and track record of successfully managing short-term rentals here in Perth without disruption to any neighbours and local amenity. The house itself is actually located in an urban medium density area within 5 minutes walk to high frequency public transport on Charles Street and Wanneroo Road, and within 10 minutes walk of Dog Swamp District Activity Centre. This is not a sterile low density suburban residential area that can only have one type of housing option. North Perth is an attractive area, and the diversity of choice that it offers is something that should be appealing to people, visitors and residents alike. As noted in the local planning scheme objectives, this inner urban area needs a variety of housing and accommodation choices and amenities to meet the diverse needs of residents, workers and visitors. The scheme provides for this by allowing holiday houses and short-term accommodation to be approved in residential zone sites. The application's been substantially revised in response to public comments, and we have limited the occupancy to a maximum of just 4 adults. We have also provided for up to 4 children to provide options for families being our target demographic. We understand that the local residents and perhaps some council have previous anecdotal experiences of noise and antisocial behaviour at some previous short stay houses, unrelated to this one. This is not, however, how Let Go operates. We are a local experienced professional organisation with a team of staff that are hands-on and proactive in screening guests and advising and enforcing our management plan and code of conduct. It would be unfair and inappropriate to apply past experiences and examples of these elsewhere to Let Go and in consideration of this development application. Our development application is committed to no parties, no loud music, no using of the courtyard after 10 o'clock PM, video monitoring of guests in external areas and visitors, and an installation of a noise monitoring device, which was successfully used at other properties we manage. This is far more stringent than how other residential properties are managed through traditional leasing methods or with owner occupiers on site. Our management approach is proactive instead of reactive, and we don't just wait for disturbances to happen. Guests will know that their noise is being monitored via real-time reporting software and acts as a deterrent for potential guests and as an intervention option for us as well, to give us a date and timestamp records of behaviour. In closing, if you have any lingering concerns, we would please ask that you allow us a 12-month approval to demonstrate the property's management success. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Can I just ask you a question? How
Yes.
many properties is Let Go managing?
Currently, it's 62-ish within a couple of
And
that.
do you have any in the City of Vincent that you're currently managing? I don't know.
Currently we don't know. It's we have had previous experiences where people in strata title or group dwellings have wanted to, and it seemed like it was going to become quite difficult
Yeah.
based on the planning policy. In this instance, we thought it's a green titled house. We thought it would be a lot more straightforward. So far, it's proven not to be. Apparently, the property is on a battle axe block there, so there's quite a few adjoining neighbours, which and there's been, I think, 6 objections to it. So that triggered the need to go to a council meeting.
Okay.
Which is the first time that's ever happened. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers this evening? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We will actually deal with the items that have been raised first so that you don't have to sit through the entire meeting, but if you choose to, you're very welcome to. Before we do that, I'll just go to the CEO for declarations of interest.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Cole, I've received a declaration of interest from Councillor Gondaszewski in relation, impartiality interest in relation to item 9.9, which is the new lease to Jigsaw contract and search. The interest noting that Councillor Gondaszewski has had some engagement with Jigsaw through her work at the Department of Health. Councillor Gondaszewski also declared an proximity interest in relation to item 9.4, the review of design guidelines and minor amendment to community engagement policy. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Gondaszewski's property is directly adjacent to the boundary of the Highgate design guideline area. Councillor Castle declared a proximity interest in relation to item 3.5, character areas and heritage areas for Wilberforce and Kalgoorlie Streets, Mount Hawthorn. 5.3, thank you, Mayor. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Castle's residence adjoins the section of Kalgoorlie Street being considered for this item. That's all the declarations I've received.
Thank you, CEO. Councillors, any other declarations that have come to mind? Okay, thank you all. All right, so in the order that the items have been raised, first from the members of the public gallery, item 6.1, Harveston Hall tenant relocation. Council members, questions on this item, please. Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you. I note that I just would want to get confirmation that the lease that we currently have in relation to that land allows the city to have commercial operations on it. Is there any caveats on the land that would, I'm thinking similar to Haynes Street or similar to anything else that would prohibit a particular type of activity being undertaken on that land?
Through the Mayor, not that I'm aware of, but I'll clarify and clarify that in the briefing notes, but not to my knowledge.
Councillors. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy for this to be taken on notice. I'm just wondering if we could have an update on the condition of the North Perth Community Centre, as there was some concerns raised in the past. And just wondering if we could get an indication of if any works will be required for that and what the life of that building is?
Yeah, through you, Nicole, we can put some information in the briefing notes or add it to the report. I think there are some works that are listed in the report, and there is budget allocated for Halverson Hall that we're proposing to reallocate to the community centre to cover those works. But I'll put some more information in the report or the briefing notes before next week.
Councillors. Director, there was a question. This is possibly more of a community and business question, or actually probably executive manager for governance, around the lease and the length of the lease and whether that is the same terms and same length as what is currently in place at Halverson Hall being offered here.
Thank you, Mayor. Most of the conditions are the same, albeit the lease being offered is, I think, 2 years longer than the current term at Halverson, from the top of my head.
Thank you, Executive Manager. And just in relation, Director, to that request for maintenance, it would be good if that could be over the life of the lease term. Your microphone is off.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Apologies. Yes, we can certainly add some information, before next week. That's not a problem.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wallace?
Sorry, but thank you, Michael. It's not directly related to the item, I guess. I'm just curious about what the fate of Halverson Hall is going to be following this.
Yes, we make also. The report talks about doing a needs analysis. So if you remember, under our asset management strategy, we're doing some work, piece of work called a building prioritisation plan. So each building will receive a review and be prioritised for what they're going to be used for and what works are required. So it'll be part of that process to decide the future of Halverson Hall. So it's not decided at the moment. I think the one thing that administration made a decision on is not to allow the property to be occupied until that piece of work is completed.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thanks, everyone. We'll move on then to the second item raised, which was item 5.8, the creation of Moore Reserve in Washing Lane, Perth. Any questions on this item? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if, I guess this is to the director, if he's still there. Can you just comment on the feedback about the impacts of this on traffic access to William Street? There was a specific concern about right turns which weren't addressed by admin in response to consultation comments. And I think the issue is that turning right from Lindsay and Money into Newcastle was seen as challenging at peak periods, but that's the proposed alternative that administration has suggested to using Washing Lane to get to William. That can be on
I think
notice.
the director's
Yep.
disappeared. Oh, here he is.
You can talk to that, Andrew, if you like.
Yeah, through my call, I put my camera on to say I haven't got that answer, so I'll have to take it on notice. But I'm sure we've got some information on that we can add to the report or the briefing notes before next week.
Councillors, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to the financial and budget implications, there's a reference in the report to the, I think it was the use of bollards, temporary bollards, and then there's also a reference to the construction of any temporary infrastructure or an improvements being the financial responsibility of the applicant. Can I just get confirmation as to where the bollards sit in relation to that? And then also what the approval process would be for any improvements or temporary infrastructure to be placed within that space.
Through the chair, I'll clarify that in the briefing note. As far as I'm aware, any infrastructure costs would be at the cost of the applicant. The approval process, I'd need to get some advice on and provide that in the briefing note.
And just also confirmation if the city can close the road without any physical closure, like as in are bollards required to effect the closure, or is some other mechanism, could that be utilised from a, I don't know, health, from a safety perspective?
Through the chair, we'll include some information in the briefing notes.
Councillors. Director of Infrastructure, I just wondered if you could tell me what condition the pavement bitumen is in at the moment. Is it due for a resurface?
Through you, McCall, not to my knowledge, but I'll confirm that. And again, we can add that to the briefing notes. But my, I mean, I've looked at it and visited, and it looks in good condition, but I'll just confirm that.
Okay, thank you. Any last questions? Okay, thank you all. The next item raised from the public gallery was item 5.2, number 12A, Highlands Road, North Perth, change of use from single house to holiday house. Questions, please? Questions from Councillor Loden?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a query about the option of a temporary 12-month approval to see how it goes. There's the query that was raised from the gallery. If you could provide a response to that question.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yeah, there's some commentary in the report about the 12-month conditional approval. The policy certainly allows for council to consider that. I guess the question that council needs to consider is whether or not you accept that the land use at its intensity that's proposed is going to be appropriate, and in which case we could then condition for 12 months. If that's something that you're seeking, we would request that an alternate is requested, and we can prepare that before next week.
Councillors, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just also, if we're putting information together in relation to 12-month approvals, if we could also put together some perhaps historical information on the issues associated with issuing temporary approvals when the planning framework is unlikely to change in terms of the capacity to defend SAT appeals, etc. Should the use pose, or should the risks be realised associated with the use?
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, we can provide that by way of commentary in the briefing notes. And again, just to reiterate that if council is considering that a time limited approval is appropriate, the question really needs to come to whether or not that land use at the intensity proposed is going to be appropriate, because it will be difficult to reconsider that after 12 months.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the only thing I'd add is that the test in relation to time extensions for commencing development it's a very different test to this test. But as the manager's just pointed out, you need to be satisfied that the intensity is appropriate and you're comfortable seeing what happens at the end of that 12 months. And if you find that nothing has happened during that 12 months, then the decision to approve it in the first instance is likely to be the basis by which you'll consider that further extension, which I think is important.
Can I interpret what you're saying to mean that if you're considering the land use, it's essential to consider that from the get-go?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I was interested in the fact that this is being put forward by Let's Go, and I just wondered if there was any knowledge of how Let's Go have managed their other 62 venues.
Through you, Mayor, we haven't looked into that as part of the application. We could certainly ask them if they'd be willing to provide some information about that. As the gentleman mentioned, they don't have any other properties within Vincent, so it's not a business we've come across, but we can certainly see if we can get some information.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay. Thank you. So now, is there anyone here on a particular item that hasn't spoken? What item are you? Wilberforce. Yep. Okay. And what are you here to listen to? Sorry. Heritage Review. Okay. So we'll then go to those two next. So Wilberforce is on item 5.3, character areas and heritage areas, outcomes of advertising guidelines for Wilberforce and Kalgoorlie Streets, Mount Hawthorn. Council members, questions on this one? Thank you, Councillor Castle, leaving due to having a proximity interest. Councillors? Councillor Hallett?
I think mine's the next one, actually.
Okay, I'm just trying to find which number that one is. Oh, 5.4. So 5.4 is coming after this one, which is the design guidelines. This is the character streets, Wilberforce and Kalgoorlie.
Can I just confirm? I think this might be 5.3. There was a recommendation about changing the consultation in this one as well.
No, that's
No, that was the other
5.4. Yeah. Any questions on this one? Look, I have a question on this one. I note that the feedback on Wilberforce is so line ball, and I note that the guidelines had been modified. First of all, I just thought it would be helpful to have the modifications summarised in the report, and it can see that they're highlighted as track changes in the actual document in the attachment. And I wondered whether those modified guidelines had been recirculated to the residents and any feedback sought or received.
Through you, Macol, the summary of the changes are relating to the provisions being too strict, which is number one, our first point of the feedback, and that outlines the changes. I will have a look to see if we can add some more detail around that. And I will include in the briefing notes whether that has been circulated, and any feedback received, we will also add to that.
I guess the question is that if that hasn't happened, would it be worthwhile happening given the not quite 50-50 result, and given that might be something that's informs the decision, would it potentially be worth deferring to allow that further discussion to take place?
To you, Macol, I believe that we have addressed the concerns that we received through the community consultation, but I will include in the briefing notes our communication around that since the changes have been made.
Thank you, Manager. Any other questions on this item? Okay. That then takes us to 5.4, review of design guidelines and minor amendment to the community engagement policy. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the recommendation to not advertise the development to the entire character area where the deviation from the deemed to comply requirements appear to only impact the neighbour or just a small number. The example of overshadowing was provided, and wondered if you can talk a little bit more about this. I guess the overshadowing, for example, would only impact on the neighbour, but the cause of the overshadowing might be the positioning of bulk, which the wider community would be interested in. And so I guess just that determination of what is really only relevant to a neighbour, and the level at which that might be quite subjective.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I suppose we have listed out exactly those things that would impact a neighbour, noting that through the existing policy, it is required for any changes to the deemed comply provisions to be advertised to that neighbour, no matter what it is. And I suppose that it is the neighbour that is concerned about the things that we have listed, and therefore they're the only ones that we would be advertising to. I'm not sure if that's...
Through Mayor Cole, the only thing I'd add is that if there was for instance, if there was a bulk impact in relation to overshadowing, the variation, for lack of a better word, to setbacks, street setbacks, heights, boundary setbacks, which are all picked up here, would be the trigger for it to be advertised in the entire street. So I would hope, and I'm quite confident that an overshadowing variation that didn't trigger any other variations wouldn't actually impact on the streetscape any greater than a development that didn't have an overshadowing variation, if you know what I'm saying, because it doesn't have those other, it complies with the deemed to comply in all other ways. So that's how we've tried to develop it. But we understand if there is a concern around that, then we're happy to review it.
Could I make a suggestion? Perhaps it could be considered around areas that are not deemed to comply, but which do not affect the streetscape or the street presence, which I think is exactly what character streets are intended to be dealing with. If you could potentially consider that and in the right form of words.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, it certainly would be worthwhile adding that as well. So if it's essentially both tests then, and I think that would hopefully help cover off that issue.
Okay. Any further questions? Director and Manager, I just had a question on Harley Street, being that Harley Street's currently the only heritage area in the character and heritage area policy. But the report, I think, talks about Lacey Street being considered as a heritage area. And I wondered, in light of not having thousands of local planning policies, perhaps would it be worth considering having a heritage area policy that could be added to, given that Lacey may join Harley, rather than having then to have separate LPPs for each heritage area that might happen?
To you, Mayor Cole, absolutely, that's something that we can have a look at. The reason we were pulling Harley Street Heritage Area out of the existing character areas and heritage areas policy was to just further strengthen that difference between the two that we kind of keep getting with this item, going through this item 5.4 and the previous item of 5.3 to make that really clear. And our initial thought was about having those separate areas with separate local planning policies, but we can absolutely look into having, if this was to progress, the 3 in the 1 heritage areas policy.
Okay, thank you. And just in relation to Brookman Moir, I just wanted to clarify, when I read through the revised policy, it appeared that it was a restructuring rather than having changes. So I just wanted to clarify and ask, the public domain view appears to be the same. It doesn't seem to be any change to having 2 stories permitted, but it's the same sort of principle of the domain view from the street. And I just also wanted to question that issue of modest scale had come up quite significantly when we did deal with the last development application. Has there been any additional defining or wording around that?
To you, Mayor Cole, I would say that also the main change to that policy would be making it more clear what that intent is. So the intent may not have changed, or the community feedback has not changed, but we're looking to make sure that the policy is more clear in the reflection of what that feedback is that we've received. So it looks different, but it's also the intent is for it to be a lot clearer, so that there's no room for any type of interpretation.
Okay, so just to clarify, it's not, for example, saying this should be a single story zone, and it's not changing the public domain view.
GMACL, that's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thanks all. Moving then to the items that we have not yet dealt with. I think that's everything that everyone's come in for. Yes, okay. Item 5.1 is number 10, Farmer Street, North Perth, 2 outbuildings, shipping containers, addition to the men's shed. This is an amendment to an approved with unauthorised existing development. Any questions? Can I just ask a question on this one? Oh, sorry, you have a question? No. Director, is this your manager, coordinator? Manager Jocelyn. I just wondered whether we should at this point reconsider the time limited approval of 5 years, given that was approved in June 2020 and we haven't had any movement on a master plan. We're only just completing the Woodville Reserve landscape plan. And we've also just given a 5-year, well, we haven't just, sorry, that's going to be decided next week, but we're discussing a 5-year lease for the artists at the same location. So I wondered whether at this point we should also sort of potentially look at whether that's 5 years from this point. Don't have to answer that now if you wish to think about it.
No, I did think about it and thought you might ask that. The tricky issue is the 5-year condition relates to the sea container approval, and currently our minor nature development policy doesn't allow for sea containers, and so that's how we've contemplated their appropriateness. We are in the process of reviewing that policy, so it may be appropriate after that to reconsider our position on sea containers, and then we at that point could reconsider the time limited nature of the approval. The other issue is that this is just an amendment to that original approval. We haven't reconsidered the entirety of the application, and that would need to be undertaken before we could review that condition.
That sounds complicated. Thank you. Appreciate that response. Anything else on shipping container additions? Okay. Item 5.5, outcome of advertising amendment 8 to local planning scheme number 2 at 26 Brenton Street, Leederville. Any questions? Okay. Item 5.6, Vincent Rebound Plan quarterly update and closure report. Any questions on this one? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just a question in relation to the vinyl wraps on William Street, which look great, and from my observation, they appear to reduce graffiti, and just wondering in relation to the administration's assessment about whether there's the potential to increase the rollout of these through this trial under the rebound plan.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll take that on notice.
Councillors. I did have a couple of questions on this one. It's just really around the timing of closing the rebound plan and the round table also. We are about to enter another wave. Who knows, it might be short-lived, hopefully. But I just wondered also if there'd been any feedback from participants to the round table about whether they also felt that that had served its purpose, or whether there was still value coming from that group meeting.
To you, Mayor Cole, yes, we've had a discussion about what value it ended up providing towards the end of the rebound roundtable sessions, and the key value that the members found was that information sharing between town teams and groups, so that they were aware what else was happening. And I suppose that knowledge sharing can then build into assisting each other and pooling of resources, which is really effective, obviously, when it's a volunteer run organisation. So due to that, we are now going to have, we're going to facilitate, I suppose, those groups coming together so that they can knowledge share and share ideas and what's going on in their areas, but it will be not the city kind of presenting what we're doing in the space, but just setting a time so that there's a time every month for the town teams to get together and have that knowledge sharing facilitated by the city, but I suppose not run by the city, and it's just an information sharing for those groups.
That sounds great, thank you. Any other questions? Item 5.7, Beaufort Street and Grosvenor Road pedestrian improvement projects. Any questions? Councillor Hallett, I think you had your hand up first.
But I've often spoken, so I'm happy to leave it for someone else.
I think the only other person was Susan, Councillor Gontaszewski. Oh, Councillor Alexander, go ahead.
I've had an email, and I think all councils had an email from Sean Offer from Fresh Provisions. And I just wanted to ask, the administration some questions largely based on that paper, but also Councillor Gontaszewski and I, with others, went up and had a look around to try and better understand it. But could I just ask, for example, one of the comments that is made by Sean Officer was, and I just want to find out from administration whether they think it's correct or not, is they're saying that the access into the heart of the Mount Lawley parking is critical access for our clients to turn in to utilise both car parks, where from that vantage point in the middle of Grosvenor Road, they can see whether Chelmsford Road's available or whether the parking on the right is available. And so they consider that, you know, the key entry into their business. Is that a fair statement?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I have not been to the site to think about whether you could see if there was parking available in both of the car parks from that vantage point. But I would say that, yes, absolutely, Grosvenor Road is a key access point to both of those car parks. Whether it's to determine that there is parking available, I can't comment, but it is definitely a key access point to both of those car parks.
Okay, so, you know, from a business point of view, they're saying that it's critical to their business to have that access there. Is that true, do you think? What I'm trying to, the question I'm asking, I guess, is they're aghast at the potential of it being blocked off permanently.
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely. I suppose we don't have the information to make that now. That's what the information we'll be trying to get through the trial. So we'll be doing a lot of observational surveys as well as traffic monitoring to see if that statement is true and if this closure has detrimental effects into accessing those businesses. And all of that data will be brought back to council so that that will inform any next steps, if any, happen in the space.
So has the City of Vincent had traffic engineers look at, you know, what this will mean for exiting at Raglan Road, which is, you know, a pretty tough exit, and Chelmsford Street?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it might be time for me to step in. So I think the simple answer is that internally we've looked at it. I mean, I think I've read the email this afternoon. It's hard not to agree with the intent of the email. I mean, we do have some concerns about traffic flow. But as the manager said, I think this is the purpose of the trial, is just to see what the impact actually is. I mean, I think we've done this with we did it with North Perth Common when we closed it. Sometimes a trial is a good way to find out how things actually work. So I think we share some of those concerns, but we'd like the trial to go ahead to see whether those concerns are justified, I think, is the straight answer. The other way to do it would have been to spend maybe $25,000 on some detailed modelling, but that sometimes isn't as good as what you actually observe. So I think we, from a traffic engineering point of view, we're happy for the trial to go ahead and to gather the information that the managers talked about through observation and data.
Okay, well, sorry, my further question was, in part of Sean's letter, is this reasonable what he says? He said, I was aghast. Why do we need this? I arranged my time to protest to the town manager, and I was told bluntly that whether there was support for it or not, the local business and community, that the mayor and the councillors had already voted that a trial would take place, and then regardless of the feedback, nothing would be changing ahead of the trial. Is that a fair statement by the people from Fresh Provisions?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I've spoken to the members of administration that was in that meeting, and I believe there's a different perception, and we obviously didn't communicate, what we were communicating was not heard as we were intending. I believe what the communication was that there was a council resolution to look at pedestrian spaces at Grosvenor Road or Barley Street, and so therefore council had resolved to do this project, and we were carrying that out. Administration did leave the conversation thinking that it was quite constructive, and that the business owners were happy to look at the trial, happy that we were going to be gathering data to see if it was successful or not, and that we were absolutely not committing to anything permanent in the space.
Okay, all right. Well, look, I'll leave it there. But there's plenty in there saying some people would like it. Are you aware of the people that have said they don't want it, and they definitely don't want it?
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely. We have heard the people that definitely do not want it as a permanent space and the people's concerns of what of the trial, and we have tried to amend what the trial looks like based on those concerns, and we will be specifically gathering data and information on those specific concerns so that we can make sure that they are measured and are not lost or forgotten throughout the trial.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Just on that, Councillor Alexander, it's I think the way it's set up is quite good. Phase 1 is 16 days, and that's the complete closure. And then phase 2, I don't know how many days that is, haven't added up the dates together, but it's less than a month, is a partial closure, so vehicles can still move through and left turn in. So I think the observation with the monitoring, the CCTV and the data collection is looking at 2 different types of, you know, full, partial, and then looking at the impacts over 2 very short periods of time. And then it will come back to us to assess. And then we can hear again from businesses at that time too, which will be useful.
Thanks.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the Executive Director's comments in relation to the preference and practicalities of undertaking a trial versus the detailed traffic modelling. I guess just wanted to get some specific confirmation in relation to like heavy vehicle traffic. In the email that we received, it was raised around the I guess, trucks accessing the markets that exist in the area and raising some concerns about the capacity for those trucks to turn into the other roads that will be available to them to access both Fresh Provisions and the supermarket and the other businesses around there. And I guess I just wanted to get some confirmation that there's no showstoppers in relation to heavy vehicle access in terms of the road design for the alternate routes that would need to be used during the trial. And then I have a second question just in relation to the paving we're doing, in confirmation that impacts on heavy vehicles that may continue to utilise Grosvenor Road should it not be closed.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole, I will double check it, but my understanding is we've checked the movements of all heavy goods vehicles and there are no showstoppers, including our own waste trucks as well, because our waste team checked that. But I will confirm that in the briefing notes that all movements are still possible. The question about the paving, again, I need to take that on notice. I haven't got that at my fingertips unless the manager's got more information on that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes. It's a similar solution to what we have used in other areas, and we are confident that other vehicles will be able to use that if the road remains open. We have another manager that's just popped up if we want more comments.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can confidently say that if Grosvenor Road was to remain open, the treatment being proposed with brick paving and a mountable curb on the side of it would allow any vehicle to go over the top of it with ease.
Thank you very much.
That's a nice backdrop you've got there, Acting Manager. Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the partial closure design, the design retains the 2 15-minute bays in that configuration. And I was wondering, given the idea there is to help with that permeability of pedestrians through that space, if there's 2 cars parked in those 2 15-minute bays, it probably would reduce permeability. I was wondering if there was consideration of potentially extending that pedestrian, removing those 15-minute bays for the duration of the trial, extending that pedestrian zone a bit further, which then also further exacerbates the turn and helps to slow traffic down further.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, there was definitely that consideration due to the exact reasons you've listed. Those 15-minute bays are remaining due to feedback from businesses that they're quite vital to their loading and offloading, as well as people that are doing those very quick trips. That's why they've remained.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Hallett.
Just, I guess, a follow-up to that one. Was any consideration given to removing them from there, but finding another location within the area to maintain short bays?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, there was. And the feedback that we received was that the location was quite vital, given it is 15 minutes for people to come in and come out in that time.
Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Michael. Just following up on that loading and unloading from businesses, they're not designated, it's not a designated loading zone, and I presume the vast majority of its use would be by just regular occupants for parking and not actually unloading and unloading. Would that be correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, sorry, I meant more of the business, people visiting the businesses coming in and out. Wrong use of language, sorry.
Got it. Thanks.
Interesting though, in one of the pictures, there's a big truck parked there. Okay, any other questions on this one? Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to administration. Is there any mechanism whereby businesses who are adversely affected from any disruption, be it a trial or otherwise, permanent or trial, if the business can be proven to be disrupted in terms of trading, is there a mechanism for them to then claim any damages against the city?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, I think we'll take that on notice and provide a bit of background on that issue, because it depends on, so the answer is yes and no as well. So it depends on exactly what is happening and what's proposed. And I know Alan deals with that all the time. So when he's doing works that are maintenance works and shutting things down. So we'll provide that in the briefing notes. Yep.
Any other questions, Councillor Gontaszewski?
Sorry, and just one more question in relation to the street furniture that we're purchasing, I'm presuming from the expenditure report. Are we putting in the same sort of stuff that would be included in the space if the trial was a success and a permanent solution was implemented? And can other things that we're purchasing or accessing be repurposed should the permanent solution not proceed?
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely to both. That furniture can remain if it was successful, and we've already earmarked many places actually, that it could go if not successful and needs to be reallocated.
Is everyone happy with that, or any last questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to item 5.9, which concerns a new lease to Jigsaw Contract and Search. Sorry, is that contract or contact? Contact. Jigsaw Contact and Search Inc. portion of Robertson Park, number 176 Fitzgerald Street, Perth. This is for Lee Hops Cottage. Any questions? Okay. Item 5.10, final adoption of Local Government Property Amendment Local Law 2022. Item 5.11, outcome of advertising and adoption of new smoke-free areas and smoke-free areas education and enforcement policy. Is it meant to say that? New smoke-free areas and smoke-free areas. I don't believe that I didn't think we currently had any smoke-free areas, do we? Unless you're talking about al fresco.
Yeah, so this is the proposal for the smoke-free areas.
I'm just querying the title because it says smoke-free areas.
I think we'll have a look at the manager's here. He'll be able to explain it.
Okay.
To you, Mayor Cole, it is to allow the smoke-free areas.
I see. I'm going to read that with the hyphen. Yep.
I tried to put an Oxford comma in there.
But I'm being really finicky about the title of items this evening. My apologies. Any questions on this one? I have a question, Manager. I have to admit, I didn't read every single word on every single page of these two items, but I wanted to ask what the penalty has been set at for the actual fine once it comes to that.
Yeah, to you, Mayor Cole, there's two offences. One of them, the penalty is $100. And then there's a further offence for a penalty for $200. I'm just getting that information up right now. So if someone's caught smoking, it's $100. If they're asked to butt out and they don't, then the penalty is $200.
If council was of a mind to amend that, where would that sit?
To you, Mayor Cole, that would sit in the previous item, which is about the property local law.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Manager. That was pretty short and sweet. Item 5.12, Development Compliance Enforcement Policy. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. This doesn't necessarily relate to this policy because its scope's been restricted, but I'm just wondering, given that the previous policy that was in place had the scope of dealing with compliance enforcement and I guess receipt of complaints relating to, well, just complaints more broadly, what's the intention of the city in relation to ensuring that there's policy direction or capacity for the city to act under if we receive complaints or reports of breaches of our local laws that aren't related to property or development?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's a question for the Rangers team. I'll take that on notice and we'll speak to them. They're responsible for enforcing all of our other local law provisions.
And I guess it also maybe relates to the customer service item later potentially as well. Just, I guess, thinking about those type of things as well.
Any further questions on 5.12? Okay, we've dealt with the infrastructure and environment item earlier, so we'll move to community and business services. Item 7.1, financial statements as at the 31st of May 2022. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I just had two quick questions. One was just about there's a reference to a credit note in the Magistrates Court, and I just don't have enough understanding of those processes to know what that is. So some additional info in the briefing notes for now would be great. And then just also note that there was 15 cash in lieu debtors, and of these 3 are on payment plans. Of the remaining 12, have their, I guess, payment dates fallen due, or should they have paid or been on a payment plan? And if they're not on either, what are we doing with them, and what happens with cash in lieu debtors that aren't on a payment plan?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we'll get some information included in the briefing notes.
Anything further, Councillor Gontaszewski? Questions on this item? Manager, I just had a question, and it might be one for the Director of Infrastructure if he's still around, or can be taken on notice. It was just in relation to the Charles Verriard $25,000 extra for the lighting upgrade there for Q1 review. I was just really interested because I have been dealing with the Cardinals Football Club and the girls who are having their football games unable to be played until that at home until that upgrade happens. And I just will need to go back to them and also to John Carey, MLA, in relation to that funding that has been provided. And I just wondered if I could get some more information on the time frame and what has caused the additional cost.
Yes, Mayor Cole, I'm probably best to answer that. So the money was provided to put new LED lights on top of the existing poles. That was, as you said, a grant provided by John Carey. The money granted sufficient to do that, to replace the lights. But when the poles were checked, the footings of the poles are not able to carry the additional weight without works, without strengthening works. So that's what the additional $25,000 is needed for. So in terms of the installation date, I think it might be in the report that it will be done in August. So it's imminent. We could do it very quickly once this report's approved next week, and we can get on and install the lights very quickly. So there won't be an undue delay.
Thank you. If I could just have a date in.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, it's extended by 1 month to the end of August.
Okay, end of August.
Yep.
Right. Thank you. Any further questions on the financials? 7.2 investment report at 31st of May 22. Any investment report questions, Councillor Loden? 7.3 authorisation of expenditure for 1st to 31st of May 22. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. Just if I could get some more information in relation to the customer experience review and the customer service establishment fee and phone coverage items, and just whether they I guess whether they relate to item 7.6 or whether they or I guess what work program they're coming under, and just a bit more information would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, we have an existing project which is about customer service improvement. The customer service charter that you mentioned on item 7.6 is one of the actions within that project, and then there are a number of other actions which you refer to. So I'll provide a little bit more detail in the briefing notes on that.
Councillors. Okay. Item 7.4, request to increase Kayla Market stallholder numbers. Continue to be a raging success story. Okay, no questions. 7.5, outcome of public consultation and adoption of access and inclusion plan 22 to 27. 7.6, advertising of customer service charter. Councillor Alexander.
I just want to say congratulations. It was a document that got to the point very quickly and was succinct. So.
And your question is, could more be like this?
Sorry, question. Sorry, I forgot the question. Thank you. Well, yes.
Could we have more? Can we have more of that?
Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to answer yes to that. Thank you.
Clarity, succinct.
Yes, thank you.
Well done.
That's lovely feedback.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
Okay, my mic's done. I'm scared to ask my question now, but just a question as to whether the customer service charter would benefit from a reference to, I'm presuming that the customer service charter and the timeframes and KPIs in that charter also relate to responses to complaints or service suggestions or service requests. It covers all engagement with the city. That's correct, yes? Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
And does the city have any other documentation, policy, protocol, etc., that would sit under, I'm presuming, either local laws or our community engagement framework related to how service requests, service suggestions or complaints or reported breaches of policy or local law are managed?
Yeah, through Mayor Cole, I'll get the specific policy, but there is a secondary document which is actually focused on customer complaint management. So yeah, no, that's fine. So I'll reference that in the briefing notes.
Councillors. Director, I had a question in relation to whether this would be the opportune time to also seek community feedback on how they are liking or experiencing the customer services hub at the library.
Yeah, through Mayor Cole, we actually have done some focus groups with groups of customers, and we have got that feedback, and we're currently building those responses into our community, into our customer service improvement project. So that work has actually been done.
Well, could I have some information about that?
Sure.
The reason I ask is that I do get feedback about the location being at the library.
Yeah.
And it is something for me I would like to have a bit more input from the customers around their experience of that.
Absolutely.
If that's possible.
Perhaps if I could provide a more general update to council in a workshop forum, we can discuss some of those findings, and then if council are comfortable with the approach that we're suggesting, then we can also make that a little bit more transparent to the community as well.
I guess my question really was that given that this is about customer service charter and it talks about the customer service hub and there will be a survey.
Yep.
Whether the two should come together at this point, because I had thought that I'd foreshadow an amendment which I'd leave on the table for you next week to consider to do with as you wish. But it is something that does come up for me reasonably frequently.
Yeah.
So perhaps if you can provide the information and
great.
And then I'll consider from there.
No problem at all.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Any other questions on the charter? Okay. 7.7 extension of lease and deed to contract Belgravia Health and Leisure Group Proprietary Limited at the Loftus Rec Centre, 501 Loftus Street, Leederville. Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to provide some context on my question, because I don't think any of the executive is here when we considered this last time round. When this was put forward 5 years ago, council amended it from a 10-year lease to a 5-year lease. And part of the reason for doing that was to allow administration the opportunity to consider options around whether we would manage that site or if we would continue in the current form. And then the flip side question to that being that if the best model here is to outsource the management, then why is that not the best option for Beatty Park, which is 150 metres away? And so I was wanting to raise that as a query to administration. I recognise that timing of something like that is not something we can address in this time frame, but it would be good to get a response on that.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole, I suppose I tried to provide a fairly high level response to that when I talked about alternative options 1 and 2. So without going into a sort of a deep dive on the ins and outs of those options, I've tried to provide a little bit of an indication of the thinking that has gone into that. I think really what has prevailed at this point in time and is dominating our thinking is that COVID has dramatically changed the landscape in the rec centre environment right now. That has significantly impacted on, I suppose, Beatty Park's bandwidth to be able to consider other options. Belgravia's has deferred leases that they need to trade through, that we need to provide sufficient time for them to be able to do that. And so I suppose the Loftus Rec Centre site is really in a period of recovering from the step back. You know, they were the most significantly impacted of the two sites by COVID and a deterioration of membership. So we went through a process of looking at, in the current state, do we feel that the existing operation is detrimental to either site? And we felt that there was enough of a differentiation between the two sites and how they were operating and the target offerings in terms of their services and their customers. In our conversations, we felt that we could support an argument that we could continue in the current model for a period of time to allow some of those other financial issues to be worked through. And we didn't feel that the deteriorating effect was significant enough for us to warrant a step change in the business model right now. But I do think that this is something that we should plan for. I know that you're suggesting that this would be the time to be doing that. And I think it's just that the last 2 years has really what would have been our flight path up to this decision point has been significantly deteriorated in the external environment. So I don't know, that's sort of a fairly high level response, but we also did have a look at some hybrid models in terms of whether or not we could come up with sort of a joint membership model and a few things like that. But a sort of a middle ground solution also was going to be fairly expensive and require some significant changes to processes and systems, which without us fully committing to that change wasn't going to carve out enough benefit. So all that being taken into account, we actually felt that the status quo right now was probably the lowest risk and the best option for us at this point in time, given capacity and the market environment.
Thank you. So I guess maybe to clarify, the report looked at the option of continuing the lease,
Correct.
then looked at going out to the market to alternative providers, and then
Yep.
an alternative, a third option, I guess, of working with them collaboratively.
Yep.
But there was not explicitly an option that considered City of Vincent taking over the management of the Loftus Centre.
Yeah, we did look at that as well.
Was
yeah.
that in the? I don't think I.
Yeah,
I missed that in the
perhaps
report.
perhaps I've not articulate that as clearly. So yeah, we did consider that as well, and I think that the short answer to that is that I suppose I was looking at it as if you have one provider managing both sites, is that an option for us to consider right now? Be that an external provider managing both sites, or be that BD Park managing both sites. I sort of looked at that as sort of a one and the same, if you like, in that, is there enough of a trigger point for us to consider that as a business model right now? And from my personal view, I believe that there are some pros and cons. There are definitely some benefits for us to consider doing that. But I would say that the BD Park team probably don't have the capacity. Going back once again to the current operating environment that we're working in, I don't think that I don't think they've got the capacity to do that. We also did have a look at the broader rec centre market within WA, and it does tend to sort of ebb and flow between outsourcing and insourcing options. And certainly what we're noticing at the moment is a lot more insourcing. So the trend in the market at the moment is for councils to bring their provision back in-house. But once again, I'd much rather do a thorough investigation around that and make sure that it was fully tested.
So does that mean that in 5 years' time we should expect a board coming back that would consider that option?
Look, I think we would definitely I think the 5-year mark is definitely when we would need to put those options on the table.
And just a final one, the report talks to the collaborative model, which I think is a good one. And I would like to request an amendment just to request a report back to council on that.
Yep.
I'm happy to be guided by you in terms of time frame of when would be an appropriate time. It'd be great to see that continue to progress. Well, it's me talking to it. So if I could get an amendment to that effect drawn up, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think that there's been some good thinking there that would be worth us going into a bit more detail.
I'm going to go to Councillor Castle next, and then to you, Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking for a bit of clarification, and apologies if this is in the report and I've missed it. Can you give an indication of the amount that the 50% of the annual land tax represents, what the reduction in the fee will be?
It's actually included in confidential attachment 4.
Okay, that's fine. I will read that confidentially.
That's fine.
I suppose the point of my question is, have we considered the budget implications of that, and can that be managed given we've only just approved our budget?
So it represents about a 15% discount on the current service fee that is charged. Bearing in mind that in the last, we've just actually charged a 5.6% CPI increase. So if you are prepared to accept that we've not retained that CPI component, then it's a 10% sort of difference. In my view, I do think that there is actually we're proposing some improved management of the capital budget for this site and doing that in a much tidier fashion and working with them to prioritise that. And I do believe that we can, through a number of these initiatives, ensure that we don't end up in a worse position. So we should be able to make sure that our finances balance.
Okay, and one question I had was a follow-up to that in relation to the annual program of capital works. Is that at the cost of the city, and has that already been budgeted for, or is that additional work?
Yeah, so it would be within, through you, Mayor Cole, it would be within our existing capital works budget. What really it's about bringing the communications together and working better with the tenant to prioritise what is the city's existing spend in terms of capital works in that site. And they are making a contribution towards a reserve. And so it's really about being a bit more strategic in how we use that reserve and bringing those pieces together and being a little bit cleverer about how we plan ahead for the management of capital works with the tenant for the benefit of that business.
Okay, thanks. Just to confirm that 31st of December 2027 would align with the end of the loan?
It does, yeah.
Okay. And just in relation to the deferred amount, I note that that's a condition of the lease. Have you had discussions with Belgravia around their capacity to enter into that agreement and what sort of term they'd be looking for to repay the deferred amount of $64,000?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole, Belgravia's initial request to us was to set up a repayment arrangement for the back half of the 5 years of the agreement, if you like. I've actually crafted the recommendation in such a way that the CEO is to negotiate with them about what those repayment terms are, and so that we can discuss I suppose the cash flow of the business and the best way to actually have that amount paid and in the most prompt way.
Okay, so really we're just looking at making sure that that is finalised by the end of the contract.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. My question just followed on from Councillor Loden's in terms of the piece of work that we sort of talked about doing in the out years and just whether this was a piece of work that would need to be reflected in a corporate business plan in terms of a business case. And I note that we're obviously having a draft coming to us. So is it currently in there, or is it going to be like, do I need to do an amendment to note that we will undertake a project in the out years of the forthcoming corporate business plan to do a business case for the operation of our leisure facilities or something like that?
Yeah. So through you, Mayor Cole, I think we were in the lead up to this discussion, we were still toying with the timing. Subject to council agreeing to this paper, we would definitely put that into the 4-year capital works program. Capital works corporate business plan is what I'm trying to say.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to add, so pre-COVID, so in the corporate business plan 2018-19, there was a project to do this work, which would have given us enough time, 2 or 3 years up to this point, and COVID did just disrupt that planning. We do have quarterly meetings, management meetings with Belgravia. The relationship's excellent. We've been exploring that collaboration model, but we haven't done that final piece about the cost benefit of direct management, 100% outsourcing, or that hybrid in between. We would certainly be able to do that between now and this next lease extension period finishing.
So perhaps the report could be updated with something like that, or the amendment, that I could do an amendment so that it sits within the recommendation. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm happy to take those comments on board and to look at the recommendation, whether or not that can be included, because that's certainly management's intent.
Thank you very much, Director. Any last questions on this one? Councillor Uplow?
I'm not sure if this is a confidential question, so if it is, I'll send it during the week rather than stopping the session. It's regarding what happens in an event of default or under the lease. I haven't read the amendment to the lease yet, but what happens in relation to loan repayments? And was that one of the primary decisions to Councillor Loden's question as to why we wanted to keep the status quo because of the obligation to make loan repayments?
Correct. So yes, so through you, Mayor Cole, definitely one of our considerations for extending this agreement is that it realigns the term of the loan with the term of the lease, and therefore it's an explicit condition that the Belgravia management agreement that they are actually paying that lease, that loan off as part of their arrangement. So we believe that's beneficial to the city. There is, in the case of a default, for example, if for one reason or another that Belgravia was unable to meet their obligations, then the loan is actually, we would first of all need to look at any penalties or satisfaction under the contract with Belgravia, and there are some guarantees that are built into that and some security that sits behind that contract. So that would be our first port of call. And then secondly to that, the city would then be required to meet the obligation of that loan. But my understanding of some of the guarantees that sit in the contract are worth about $500,000 against a loan outstanding of about $1 million. So we would potentially have a deficit of the net amount of that, which is the $500,000. And in my view, the risk to the city is fairly low, because the working relationship is quite good, and we have those quarterly management sessions where we're able to work cooperatively with them on the business. But the other thing too is that if there was a sudden default, we would then escalate a situation where we would move management into that centre, continue to trade in that centre, and then the revenue generated from that centre would go towards paying for the loan and overheads. So effectively, we would pick up that obligation and trade through it.
To follow up, if I can. So the security is unencumbered, so it's held in cash, or it's not a guarantee, like a director guarantee or anything, which is subject to the ability to repay still, but we hold that security in effectively in cash. It's liquid.
I'd need to find out a bit more about that. I've seen reference to it, but I haven't. Perhaps if I can take that offline, just in terms of confidentiality. Yeah.
And just final question. Not talking about a situation of default, tenant default, but if the lease was, like, if we didn't choose to extend this lease, are we saying that the total loan, the unpaid balance of the loan just transfers to us in terms of obligation? And that was one of the main criteria as to why we were just happy with the status quo?
Correct. So it's actually the city that carries the loan with the WA Treasury. And it's through the agreement that we are receiving payments against that loan, which we then in turn pay through to WATC. So we are ultimately carry the loan.
Any other questions on Loftus Community Centre? Loftus Recreation Centre. Okay, thank you all. Moving to Chief Executive Officer items, there are 3 this evening. We have 8.1, outcome of advertising of amended policy, flying and displaying of flags and banners policy. Noting there were no feedback from community on that one. Item 8.2, outcome of advertising of amended policy, CEO annual performance review policy. Also no feedback, but any questions? And lastly, item 8.3, information bulletin. Councillor Loden.
Sorry, this is a finicky one, but the numbers don't quite add up in terms of development applications. So in reviewing it, there were 29 DAs determined and 27 lodged, but the number of DAs over the month went up by 4. So I just wanted to check if one of those numbers is in error and what the actual numbers were.
Yes, Chair, Mayor Cole will take that on notice and I'll work that out with the team.
No, we absolutely don't.
Sorry, has that been taken on notice, or John, you're doing research now? Taken on notice. Sorry, I thought you were deeply looking into your laptop there. Any other questions on the info bulletin? Okay, well, look, this is pretty impressive, but that completes our business for this evening. So that means that we can thank anyone who's been tuning in on the live stream and declare the meeting closed at 7:25 p.m.